Okay, I think we're live, and I think, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
Maybe.
It says you are host now.
Okay, do you see options and
Along the bottom. Share
yeah, I don't know
screen
if they're any different.
looks the same to me.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'm going to leave. If
okay.
there's a problem, Tom, text me and I'll get back in.
All right. Appreciate
All
it.
right,
Thank you,
thanks.
Jason. Yep. All right. I think we have everybody for the meeting this evening. And I guess, Kyle, do you want to, or do you want me to lead?
I believe most of what we have to talk about's on you. About the most I need to do probably is call the meeting to order.
Correct.
And we just need to have everybody approve the minutes.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay, so let's call the meeting to order. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes and read them?
Yes.
Any corrections?
No corrections.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve as written.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
All right. There's a number of things I think we sent out an agenda before the meeting. I think what I will do is maybe touch on the other things first, because the one that we probably can spend the most time is on the water source protection plan. Lynn was good enough to email us some information she had worked on, which I do appreciate. Helps us move the process forward. But I think some of the others will be much quicker to cover. So we'll kind of cover those, then come back to that. Under old business, we do have a note just on here for informational purposes, Ohio Drilling. Again, too, we did have contact with them again. They do have the PO number issued to them, so they're aware that we're just waiting on them. I think the last meeting, the concern was them being able to take their heavy equipment back into the well field. So it may still be that probably the issue there. I know on the other, with the SCADA system, we did have an email also from them, and we did give them the PO. Sound like they were ordering the parts for that from the last email that I saw, and that they would contact Mike when they're ready to come in and schedule that work to be done there as far as on the water tower, the water plant, and at the well field as well, as far as communication systems. So both of those are in the works, and I know that Bob's been informed of that as well. So Bob's aware that those two projects are on the go. On the water tower project itself, just an update of where we're at. Again, to Ryan Marthy, of course, at our last meeting had reviewed basically the bid documents. He did put together an email that he sent out to Bob. Then him and Bob have had a conversation. They basically arranged a conversation between the two of them to review those items. My understanding is they're in the course of CT is implementing the suggestions that Ryan had given on our behalf. So they'll be completing that as well. The only holdup now that we have that we've become aware of, Ryan Marthy had originally sent me information, but then also Jennifer from CT also confirmed, and we had a conversation, is that OPWC for right now is putting on hold as far as the awarding of those projects. And again, partly that's mainly because the state is in a 2-year budget cycle. This July 1st would have been the start of a new capital budget. And obviously the legislature hasn't been meeting. So as a result, they haven't passed the capital budget. And I also think that just in light of other issues that the state's dealing with, there's been a pause in relationship to that. In talking with Jennifer, who has talked with Donna Kirkbride from OPWC, she's indicating though that they're only looking at it as a delay. That our places as far as award within the district will not change, our ranking or our points. And the intent would to continue to fund those projects, but at this point in time, they're not saying that will be July. It may be in the fall. And again, too, the assumption at this point is they'll all be funded. The only thing that could come into play if they don't fund the original amount that they were told that they would be funded at, then obviously projects that may be farther down on the list may have to wait. Now, since then also, there's conference calls every Wednesday with all the mayors in the state of Ohio can log in, and it's with the governor's office. At the last Wednesday, I did raise the question relative to OPWC and whether or not they would, they have had discussions as far as timeline and making certain that that's communicated, simply because at this point, in talking with CT, it doesn't make sense for us to bid that project out until we know the funding from the state is going to be in place, simply because not allowing too much time to lapse between us receiving bids and when we could actually accept a bid. Concern is there's too large of a gap of time that we may have to rebid the project. So I asked in relationship to that would we, what kind of timeline could they give us, even at the point in time that they've discussed or have an idea. The individual from the governor's office said that they would have discussions on that and they would get back to obviously all of the individuals on the conference call. Today, the meeting notice I received for this Wednesday's meeting, they're going to have the OMB, Office of Management Budget, will be on the line for this week's. So I'm assuming that they may be sharing more of that specifics and what they're thinking. But at this point in time, it just makes sense for us to go ahead and have everything ready. So I've encouraged CT to continue to finalize documents with Ryan. And for us to make certain that all the other things are done. So whenever we do get that timeline, we'll be prepared which to put out for bid and hopefully move forward at that point. But again, I would just want to share that information with each of you as well. And again, too, kind of jumping then down to the other items on there, in talking with Bob and also with Jennifer, really, with a lot of the stimulus money that they're putting out for as far as local entities. The thought is, especially for Jennifer, she knew the last time that they did that, a lot of times the state will look for projects that they consider already vetted or already engineered on the community's part to basically look for projects to flow money through. With that in mind, I think they had already been working on as far as the lining of some of the sanitary sewer lines that we cleaned recently. And I think that CT had already sent that email to all of us, if I recall correctly. And in that, they basically identified the two lines, the one by Northeast Street that ran, up along the creek. And then also the other one was the line that was near the park, both of those to be lined. Today, Bob did send an email to me indicating a new price on those for that project. It's about $175. They're proposing that we obviously make that our OPWC application project for this coming September. The only thing I'd thrown back to them was whether or not there was additional line that we'd want to include in that. And the one line that Mike had indicated when Lake County was down and cleaned, that they also cleaned because their time is based upon days and we had more time in the day. So Mike did have them utilize that time to do a line that ran from Milton Street, if I understand the intersection of Milton and Center, east on Center Street, and then it runs back to the sewer plant. So they did clean that as well. But now today in Bob's email, he indicated that that line he shows does not need to be lined. That the condition of the line is sufficient, that he doesn't recommend that that be necessary. And again, too, I think what it comes down to is obviously that project would be one, but again, in this dollar amount, if we're going to obviously apply to OPWC, it's something that we would have the ability to ask for or have a project up to 500,000 Obviously, we may not want to go that much, but whether or not we want to, and I guess I'd be open to Mike's suggestions. If there's any other lines that he's aware of. Of course, CT pushed, again, the concept of wanting to do doing the master plan or master study of the sanitary sewer lines to allow them to assess, as far as over a 5-year period of time, lining of the sanitary sewers, making it a program that, similar to what we do with water mains, and having them line a certain number of sanitary sewer lines each year. And again, making those a priority on our OPWC filings each year for grant money. Again, I would throw that out to you folks for input as far as what direction we need to give maybe CT, if we just stick with what they've identified or whether or not we want to increase. Jennifer's thought is that there may be money available and it doesn't hurt us to be prepared with the project because we may very well be able to, land some funding for it apart from OPWC specifically. So.
One of the things I was kind of thinking about, and Mike, you might be able to input on there. I can't remember if it was your suggestion or Tom from Agri's suggestion for monitoring the lines at the park, waiting till there was rainfall and just popping open the manhole covers and kind of looking and seeing how things were coming. I don't know if that's something that could possibly transfer to just even checking some of our own manhole covers here without actually televising them. I don't remember some of the specifics. I just remember he was talking, just walking the line and doing the manholes. Does that ring any bell for you?
Right. He did suggest that, and that's a good suggestion if we're prepared for it. When his suggestion was blocking off the storm drain just to see if there was a difference with the storm drain blocked and then not blocked. Flow into there. And I don't know that that's going to make a difference, but anyway, that is something we would like to do if we're prepared when it starts to rain. But with the camera idea from CT, I think that's a wonderful idea, but I hate to commit to spending money on that, I guess.
Yeah, and that's
an idea I had was I don't think to buy a camera, not one that would go 1,000 feet, but a shorter one might not be that bad of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then we could go a short distance and get a pretty good idea, I think, between manholes, what's what all over town. But again, that's something we couldn't run out and do at the drop of a hat, but we could plan for something like that. But it's something to think on.
I would agree if there's a way we can possibly do some of this ourselves and see where some of the issues are. I'm all for that.
I think doing an audit of the lines is a good idea. I do like the idea of doing it in-house. If we do have some records on the sewer system, if we know what lines are older and have not had repairs, that might be a good place to start instead of going to full-blown audit of the entire town.
Question, even when I was on the board many, many years ago, we had cameraed some lines then. Do we have any place where all of those records are kept so we know what we have done, what we haven't done? Or do we need to start that documentation process now?
We contacted Lake County Sewer, and this was like last year. They required certain documents. Honestly, from what we can tell, the documents have disappeared. So all we could do is ask them to go through and do it again. I'm sorry?
We do have the reports from each of those. Actually, CT has them at the present.
Oh, do they? The last time I checked, nobody could find them.
Well, they have them now.
Oh, good, good.
A while back, they were hidden at the sewer plant, but we have found them since then. So
nice. Okay, so yeah, we do have records of when they've been grouted and if there has been lining done.
And we have a box full of VHS tapes in case somebody wanted to see them.
Is it worthwhile starting to like document by street on like some kind of database so we don't have to rummage through documents all the time?
Well-
Isn't that something?
Yeah, we do have the project that RCAP did, which RCAP came in, which is an entity that basically put digitally all of our sanitary sewer lines, all of our water lines, basically all of our infrastructure. So that's already in place. Probably what we would need to do is take then the documentation we have as far as, because we can attach within that program, obviously any documentation that we want. But obviously going forward, as we do projects, that automatically happens or is being done. But we would have to go back and look at those documentations we have and then make those notations on those lines in that program, as I understand. And Mike probably could speak a little bit more to that, because I know he's the one that obviously coordinates that going forward as far as with RCAP.
I think you're right there, Tom, with all what you said there.
So again, probably maybe it sounds like what we want to do is start with maybe taking that program and pulling out what we have documentation and kind of put together what we're thinking. I guess then the question is whether or not you want to entertain it. I don't know. I'm assuming, Mike, you, in throwing that out as far as the camera, you have not necessarily researched anything relative to cost.
I have not. I get an ad on a magazine once in a while, and they don't seem astronomical.
Okay. And I guess I would throw that out there. Do we want Mike to look into the cost and the possibility to consider that, especially if we're going to try to do some things in-house before we would go forward?
I say we should look at it. I pulled up, I Googled while we were talking. There was one that was specifically dedicated for sewer lines, and about the cheapest there was 2,500, which I don't think we wanted to spend, but I'm actually pulling up like one now, and let me click buy now and just see what it comes up as. It's not giving me a price. Actually, it's from Rigid, which should be somewhat reasonable and fairly decent quality if it does what we do. I didn't look at any of the specs on that one.
Mike, I assume you're going to have use for the camera outside of just doing audits on the sewer lines, correct?
Well, you would think that, yes. Yeah, I can imagine that we would use it if there was a clog or a problem that we needed, as of now, we just guess at it. So I imagine there would be something, but it'd be something that we wouldn't use weekly, probably.
Yeah.
But,
handy to have in a certain situation.
right.
I think it's worth a look.
Mm-hmm.
At least get a cost basis and compare it. I mean, if we have an asset, then we can continue to use the asset versus paying somebody, paying a subcontractor or whatever to come out and do the audit, which may or may not be necessary. I think that's something else we'll have to discuss. But
I do think the audit itself would be a look at the system. Great thing.
So if I'm hearing right, then maybe ask Mike to look into that a little further and bring something back as far as suggestion. And that way then it will enable us to obviously start to look at each of the lines and make a decision in relationship to maybe analyzing what we think, we would want to go as far as, ranking them. And in the meantime, also maybe pull out the documents and try to start putting some of the information we already have as far as past work, trying to implement that into the RCAP program. Does that sound?
yeah, I think that sounds like a good plan.
I would agree if we have the information, it needs to go into the GIS mapping, and that way we have access to it.
Okay. And I see Lynn sent her message to us. From Lynn Mumont to everyone, I agree. That's clever. If I was as good as that. But again, I would say then why don't we plan on that? I know that I will probably then respond to CD. Of course, what they were pushing was 0% interest to borrow to pay them their study. But I will tell them that we're continuing to move forward. As far as the specifics on the project, as far as the OPWC, obviously proposal that we would put together, do we want to stick with just the 2 lines that we've already identified then at this point?
Unless there's another line that's been showing any type of issue or problems.
Mike, I would throw that back to you. Is there any that you would suggest off the top of your head that we would want to consider?
I do not have one that I would suggest. I'm sure there's one out there, but it hasn't shown its problem yet.
Tom, when do we have to commit to that?
Well,
Just gonna,
we have some time on it, and that is an issue because it isn't like, I think of these, for them to put together what they need to isn't nearly as labor consuming, simply because we already have lengths for all the sewer lines. So basically they need the length and the size, and then they just run the numbers based upon what they already have. So I don't think it's that. It's just, I think the only reason that Jennifer thought it would make sense for us to probably submit sooner rather than later is because, as she explained, the last time there was federal stimulus money, they started actually awarding communities money and projects. And she, at the time, had 4 projects that were funded. And she said it was before they even had an application available for communities to submit projects. And when they inquired, they said, well, they basically were going to submitted projects like for OPWC that weren't even heard yet, simply because it gave them a source in which to draw projects from that they considered were ready, that they could, obviously, direct money to, and get projects up and running relatively shortly. And that was the only reason she suggested that, if we know what we want to do, the sooner we do it. For OPWC, it's in August, because it's in September, then that they start having meetings for the award of it locally. So.
Would we be able to submit the cost of the audit along with the repairs that we have?
I asked that question, and I don't know that they gave me that answer. I can ask that again. I asked them that as well. And I asked Jennifer specifically because she seems to be the individual that's more really informed as far as, grants and funding. She used to work for a community before she worked here at CT. And again, too, one thing she did share with me was, which I was unaware of until this conversation, CT does have working for them the immediate prior director of OPWC is working for them. He retired. He's working as a consultant with CT. So that's how they kind of have, a lot of information relative to what's happening with OPWC with funding a project. So, but again, I'll throw that back out and just ask her again. In today's email, I looked at it briefly, and it looked like what he was offering Bob, as far as us moving forward, would be a 0% interest loan in which to pay for the funding or for the study on that project. So, and again, I think if we come up with a project for this year, I think we're good to go. And then I think we can, kind of do what we're talking about, and then obviously feel as though whether or not we're getting to where we'd like to be, and we'd have more time between now and next year project.
Also, too, when I went down to the waste treatment plant, I was talking with Bob, and I was telling him if we ended up going forward with one of the lining projects, and this is where it's subjective, because you can get a rainstorm and, this one might drop, 2 inches of water. The next one, maybe it's 3 inches, maybe it's 1.5 inches. So it's, subjective. But I told him we need to let them know when we've got them lined, and that we would like feedback from them. And we know they can't be exact because you can't monitor the exact number of rain, but to tell us, oh, hey, we think it made a difference. We think maybe a 5% or 10%, or no, we don't notice any difference at all, because that should also guide us. If we do one sewer project that we think is pretty bad and we don't see a difference, at some point, how far do you go with it, with spending money,
Sure. So I guess it sounds like we kind of have a consensus. So Mike, if you want to go ahead and get some information back together, then probably send it out to everybody. Then we can go from there as far as, looking into possibly some equipment to allow us to look at things ourselves. And, I guess that's probably the only thing on that as far as the I&I. I guess the next thing would be a couple things. It isn't on the agenda, but I'm going to throw it out there. I know that Kyle, you'd sent out about as far as the damage relative to treatment plant after the storm. And I did already, actually today, I was called right before this meeting by an adjuster from PEP, our insurer. They had indicated that, yes, that it would be covered, obviously, because it was storm related. They are going to come and have someone come Thursday at 10 o'clock. And this is for Mike's purpose also. And I'm assuming maybe Bob as well. He's going to come and basically document what he needs as far as for the claim itself. And I think what they're looking for is, and I gave them information as far as parts, not the specifics, but that we were ordering parts, and then also that we had an electrician and who that was. But I think what they'll probably be looking for is maybe, and I don't know if we need to, if Bob will know what parts were ordered, if we need to talk with Tom from AgriSludge and get that information. So when he comes on Thursday, we have what he needs.
I know
Go ahead.
What
when I
time?
saw there that Dean was right there talking with Bob, so I would say at least Bob would have an idea. Tom might have a better idea of price if Bob doesn't know.
Mike, that's probably something if you would see if you can't, obviously, see if you can't come up with what they need. And I don't know too, if the electrician has been out, are you aware?
I am not aware.
Okay. Again, we might just touch base again, even if they have, because he's probably going to ask those questions. So, but in asking, I think our deductible, I can't imagine it's not going to exceed it because the electrician alone is probably going to charge more than what the deductible was, in my just estimation. So like I say, they're sending him out Thursday at 10 o'clock. And he does have the location of the sewer plant, and that's where I'll show up.
Okay.
And Tom, and I don't know, Tom Abraham copied you on this. He did say he thought everything was under 1,000 with labor and everything, is the email he had sent me.
All right. When again, we'll see. They said, when I called, they said they would prefer us go ahead and start a claim and then obviously have the option. I was speaking to him about other concerns we had because the last council meeting, they had raised the question of whether or not any of the costs that we have incurred with COVID-19 might be covered. And their approach at this point is that the local Hummel group said that they've been told to go ahead and submit. There may be some coverages available. So with that also, they were already obviously having conversations with us concerning moving forward in that. And again, too, that's something that from the very beginning, Becky has been documenting all costs related. And the next thing on our agenda here would be specifically, and I asked Becky to put it on, is that as all of you are aware, we did obviously suspend shutoffs as far as water and utilities for non-payment. We did make that obviously on our website, made that release to the daily record so people are aware they're not put in that situation of feeling the pressure, especially if they've been laid off and don't have the means in which to do it. And again, too, obviously the state eventually passed that as well. And I think Tom had forwarded that to us through an email from the EPA, but we had already put into place that action. So really we had already taken care of that. But the one thing I talked to Becky was on the other end of this, when we eventually begin to see things return to normal, and the state would obviously end the declaration that they have in place that places a moratorium on that. We need to think a little bit about the aspect of how we're going to restart, meaning that obviously I think in my mind, once that's done, we would expect people to make their payments. And I guess my suggestion was we'd expect them to make their current payments. But if in fact they have a past amount, I think it may be unrealistic to expect people to catch that up within the first payment period that they have due. And I think that probably what we need to be doing is thinking a little bit about whether or not, we're going to provide some sort of payment plan on the past due amount and how that might look as it relates to obviously something that's workable for folks, but also make certain that, we know that obviously we're being responsible to the village as well. So I did have that put on there. And again, we don't have to decide necessarily, but I think we need to be thinking about it. So that way, then, we, have a sense of what we want to do. So we can make certain that we're prepared to communicate that for Becky to implement that. So I don't know if there's any thoughts now, you're welcome to, but my initial thought was that I think it would make sense for them. But the only thing Becky had shared was, which is going to make it a little bit more challenging, as she indicated in the system that we use for billing purposes and payments, is that it will always apply the payments to the past. In other words, so the oldest portion of the bill. But I guess my thought was that we would want them to stay current once we obviously rescind this policy, but then also at the same time pay a portion of the past due balance. But again, I guess we're open to suggestions on that. We can't hear Lynn.
I think there would be some kind of option, pay, the total amount, pay over 2 or 3, but then some statement that it has to be completed, fully completed by, let's say, December 31st, because after that, then the shut-off rules have to go into place. At some point, we have to say, starting here, our shut-off rules are now back in place.
Sure. And that's where I'm open to suggestions as far as what, you want that to be or how that might look. And again, at least if we have a sense and, we can think about it and then obviously reconfirm at the May meeting.
Well, I think Lynn has a good idea. I think that's something we need to do. I think it's going to pretty much come down to how long the stay-at-home order stays in place and how long things take to get back to normal. Are we talking about a second wave come winter? We may have to redraft our plans at that point as well, because we don't know if we're gonna have another stay-at-home order at that point. So I think it's a little bit in limbo right now, but I think we can get the bones of it together. I like the idea of, we have to set a deadline from our understanding at the time of when things have to be paid back for the shutdown order to go back in place. And I guess, Becky, what's the flexibility of the system as far as how we send out bills? We have your current amount you owe, and then if we want them to pay a certain percentage of the past due, are we able to do that, or we have to?
I don't have any flexibility. It prints, yeah. We'd have to send it with some sort of a letter.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a couple ways I would think you could look at it. Is we could tell them they have to pay a certain percentage towards past due, or you could just give them tell them, oh, hey, you have 3 months or 4 months to have everything fully paid off. Is the 2 ways to look at it. Either way, you could set a deadline, but I agree with Ryan. Some of it depends on exactly what they do.
Right.
If we go back in May, if everybody gets back to work in May, not as big a deal as if it's held off to June or July or something ridiculous like that.
And
people are going to be backed up, 2 to 3 months at that point.
And from what I'm hearing, they may even do kind of a soft restart of things where they may have certain places might restart and others may still be restricted. So,
right.
That makes a difference too.
Right. And again, obviously, utility portion of it, they did have, obviously they're going to obviously dictate when that will end in relationship, even though we passed it ourselves, obviously, since the state passed theirs, obviously we can't change that until they change theirs. But at that point in time, it sounds like maybe, like Lynn said, I don't think it's a bad thing to allow people to pay that option, pay it all, because some people may choose to do that, have the ability if they're back they're employed. But then it allow them a certain number of months, you know, and I guess, you know, if you're saying 3-4 months, which pay off the past due balance. And again, maybe what we can do is make a decision closer depending upon how long it is and what some of those balances may be as far as average with people. So,
I think you're on mute again, Lynn.
Yeah, and then I see it all, but not hear you.
I assume we are still sending bills out and allowing people to pay if they are able.
Oh, yes.
yes. The only thing we've
Okay.
done is we've suspended any penalties. She had the ability to go in, and those that have not paid on time. Now, what she indicated when I talked to her this morning, and she can correct me, she said it was about $740 or so for the last month, which most of that month, though, it really didn't start, you know, because that was March and it was due by the 21st, 22nd, depending what the day was. So the reality is that really wasn't impacted as much. And she said that's somewhat normal.
That is normal.
You know, so if that gives you an idea that, you know, what that, you know, past due amount late fee is per bill, and we have about that much in, you know, as far as 740 in a given month. She's going to run a report at the end of this billing cycle to see where that is and see how that number changes. That way we can track it as well to see the impact as far as what we're saying. And a lot of people are still paying that have the ability. It's just that it does give those that don't have that, obviously means right now them the flexibility of not having to feel the need that we're going to shut them off. So, but she is tracking that as well. And that cost, again, she's going to track because it's lost revenue. So that's one of the other expenses we're obviously, you know, keeping record of, because we're keeping track of everything we can think of, because that way, if there is federal money available to cities as a result of expenses we've incurred, we're going to try to recover those as well. So, or if not, see what the insurance company may look at as well on that side of it too. So, all right. Then I guess that probably gives us a kind of a direction and a sense of on that. I think then the other items would be, I think that's the only thing. Is there anything else you can think of that I didn't necessarily cover? And we can go back then to the water source protection plan.
Yeah, that's all I know.
All right, then why don't we go back to the first item on there? And I don't know, I know that Lynn had obviously put together some information that she sent to each of us. And maybe I'll just let her speak to what she did and what she's thinking. We can kind of go from there.
Okay, it's probably better if you haven't looked at the document yet, it's probably better if you look at the chart. I sent out the chart, and what it has on there are highlights, and then my best guess or shot at how we would complete each one. And I did end up putting numbers beside each item so we would have some reference. And wherever you see, like on table, I think 6 or 8 is where it starts. I think 6 is the first one. If it says www, that's a website, and that was sent in the email. There was no easy way just to put a link in there because I didn't have a full Adobe at the time. So then on the email, I referenced like table 5, number 2, and I tried to give some description of what it was. And some of those links are probably good. Some are, you know, Mike may look at the link on the sewer and septic systems and say that really has nothing to do with it in actuality. But I tried to find some things that would help us in those educational pieces. So that's how the chart and the email work together.
And I think that's a great starting point. That's very, very detailed on how you have it broke down. I have not had a chance to follow any of the links or anything, but I definitely need to. If we have stuff on there, I can pull that off and put it to any type of file. Like even if there's PDF files, I can pull off of that and put it on a separate PDF or anything if we need to, if we're talking about doing like a pamphlet in-house.
And the other thing, I should mention, Mayor, and maybe you can help us out on this. I did notice there was a chart with all of the completed plans, the ones that have been blessed and approved. And I did notice one from West Salem Village was done in 2016. I'm wondering if we can get their plan or talk to somebody who did that, because if it's been approved, that may help us help us with the information and what they're expecting.
Sure. I would think most communities are more than glad to provide us with copies so we could reach out to them and ask them for a copy of their plan. I think that would make sense. And I don't know, maybe hopefully if it was something electronic, they could just email it to us. And then we could obviously print out copies and look at the appropriate sections. And
maybe,
yeah, go ahead.
So maybe the next step is by the time of the next meeting, everybody kind of reviews the chart, makes their own notes, looks at the links, says yes or no, or has a different link, then maybe we can just keep filling boxes in.
Sounds good. And what I will do is I will make a note for myself to reach out to West Salem and inquire as far as receiving possibly a copy of their plan. And I maybe also ask as far as who completed theirs.
Yeah.
Because you found obviously on the net where they had a plan in place and it was approved.
Yeah, that link there, if you go to table 6, number 1, the bullet 2, list of current swaps, and the ones that I could find in the county, of course, Orville was 2008 and Worcester was 2000, but I suppose I didn't even look at Holmes County. Maybe there's some other neighboring counties that have some that have been completed recently. But yeah, there's a whole list and it's broken down by county.
Okay. Okay, and I see that, the list there that you have listed there. So, all right.
Right.
Are there other questions? And I do appreciate it. You understand how much I'd like to finish this process and kind of get this taken care of. Just with everything else that's going on, obviously it hasn't happened, and I just look at it sometimes and think, oh my goodness, So I am appreciative of the effort because obviously we do need to finish it up. I'm certain that Doug from Cox and Coleman is probably wondering if we've totally forgotten about it. But he obviously has been patient, but he's just waiting for us basically then to get back to him so he can actually finish the drafting of it. So.
And they don't have any other clients that are working on it, Cox and Colvin?
Pardon? I didn't catch you on that.
Cox and Colvin, do they have any other clients that are working on it?
I don't recall that they've mentioned that. It could be something we could throw out and ask them specifically. My understanding, we're fairly on the front end of it from the standpoint of most, because initially part of the problem was obviously there were only certain individuals, certain companies that were approved to do this work. So CT, there aren't a lot out there. So initially there was a little lag in as far as them finding, this individual or this company relative to this project. And again, obviously, at least from my context of working with them, they're extremely professional. He seemed to know what he was doing. It wasn't cheap by any means, but like I say, obviously, he seemed to know what it was that he was doing, and he had obviously the proper credentials in which to put it together for us. So,
one thing I would add, if anybody's following the links, seeing stuff that we should be putting in a pamphlet, if it's on like a website, if you can print that section off, or even copy and paste it into a Word document, or if it's a PDF, if you save it and stuff, that way we can start collecting data for it. That would be probably a big help too.
Yeah. So what are we paying Cox and Colvin to do then?
they met with us initially. And what they put together was this 75-page draft document that they did.
Okay,
They obviously, when you look at the maps as far as where the wells are located, identifying the, you know, the locations that they that they identified as possible contamination sources, they did, you know, basically all that legwork. I'm assuming a lot of the things as far as the forms that they used are probably something they used from various communities, but obviously what they did was did the research and then put it back into this document specific to us and our locale. So that was what, you know, they've done to this point. And again, too, most of it was just assembling the information relative to the potential risk to the well fields and identifying them, and then putting together some strategies as far as in general broad terms, but for us to meet out as far as specifics, because as they put, there is no timeline designated for implementation of the plan totally. That's up to us. Now we have to develop a timeline, but the development of the timeline is simply, you know, in our hands. So that's why they were reluctant to, you know, to really do some of this, because they felt it made more sense for us to say back to them, you know, what works for us from the standpoint of implementation. So I will send something out to West Salem, and maybe what I'll look and see if there's any others that are more recent in Holmes County or anywhere, and see if we can't get a copy of theirs as well. And like you say, we can start to work on putting this into the document then.
My guess in Holmes County, it would either be Sugar Creek or Millersburg would be about the only people up on things. I mean, just as a guess.
Correct.
Was that everything we had? You have anything else, Tom?
Not that I can think of, unless there's anything that, Becky, that you can think of?
No?
No?
Yeah, and again, like I say, you know, once I hear back from obviously CT in relationship to the water tower project, and the documents are here, but it sounds like Ryan and Bob are working on that together. And at least from what I've read, I think that, you know, obviously I think that Bob's, you know, has no issue with implementing the things that Ryan had raised for us. So, and hopefully we'll find something out about the water tower project. You know, and I could be wrong, but I think that it'll be very competitive bidding in relationship to projects. And the reason that we say that is the number of individual bidders that have requested bid packages for a street project for this summer has already seems to be greater interest than in the past. And we already on other projects, give an example would be B&K was doing downtown sidewalk project this year. They contacted us and they said they were looking for projects. Were we ready for them? And we said yes. Another example would be obviously Berkey's replaced the catch basin that Mike identified on East Prospect Street that needed replaced before we paved that street. And again, too, Berkey, sometimes, you know, we kind of need to prod them to get in to do it. They contacted us and they had a project canceled. They were looking for work. So I think a lot of these entities out there are probably gonna be looking for projects. And that's why, you know, like I say, I'm feeling as though as soon as the state can commit that their portion of the funding is available, I think it will work to our benefit from the standpoint of the competitiveness as far as companies wanting to have jobs and projects. And on the other side of it is the interest side of it. Already we've seen obviously great benefit because of what the Fed has done as far as interest rates. And before the last drop to zero, I'd had Jennifer run new amortization schedules. And depending how long a term period that we were going to finance the balance for, we had already probably saw a savings of $50,000 to $90,000 in interest costs alone. And in talking with Pam, given the fact the interest rates are where they're at, I think that we've already decided that we're going to only go 20 years versus even considering a 30-year term on the balance of that $600,000 that we're borrowing. Because again, the interest costs are minimal, allows us to be able to obviously have a greater amount of money going towards principal, which allows us to pay it off quicker. So that's somewhat our intent as far as in talking with Pam in relationship to the information that Jennifer's given us to this point. So I think all those things will work to our benefit. Not that any of us wanted this, but the reality is it may be the best time for us to be borrowing $600,000 for a project such as this, and even from the standpoint of maybe the competitiveness of the bids as well. So, but I think that's it that I can think of. So.
One addition, I did check on Killbuck is 2016 also. Killbuck has an approved plan.
Killbuck, okay.
Do you think these might be on their websites? Some of these, like this?
Oh, I don't know.
We can look.
I might look just to see.
Yeah, why don't you look tomorrow and let me know? If not, we'll inquire by email to them. Depends if they have websites, is comprehensive.
Right.
Ours is pretty nice. And again, for your information, I don't know you folks have gone to it recently. We did upgrade our website right prior to all this, which has been very useful to us because it's allowed us to have a lot more flexibility. And we did have one tab that's just COVID-19, that all communications relative to policy changes or informational type things we have posted there. And it's allowed us to run banner across the top of that website as well. And Beverly's been obviously administering that for us, but we had already approved that and it came online right prior to all this. So it's been very beneficial from a communication standpoint piece. So, because there is lots of information that flows as a result of COVID-19, I assure you, more than I've ever imagined as far as all the different entities sending, whether it's the Attorney General's office, weighing in by emails and information, the governor's office, obviously the Mayor's Association, Ohio Municipal League, just multitude of information that's come through. So, all right. Is there anything else that anyone else has question-wise?
Oh,
Looks like the date of the next meeting would be May 11th. That works for everybody.
Correct.
mhm.
And I assume we will touch base as far as how we're meeting as well. Also, and just a note, since you mentioned it on your agenda, council is moving their meetings till Tuesday evenings, and the dates for those. So from now on, we'll be meeting on Tuesday evenings rather than on Mondays. So,
Okay.
all right. Well, then, do you want to call the meeting adjourned?
Have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We'll
All right,
see you
thanks,
all
everybody.
11th.
Appreciate it.
Call, text, email if you need anything.
All right.
Okay,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Have a good evening.
Yep, you too.
You need-